Standard 38 on intangible assets is an accounting standard that in theory you have done at F7, and when I teach it at F7 there's nothing really that I hold back. So for some of you this may be pure revision, for others of you of course this may be something that is a bit rusty and I'm bringing you up to speed on. The way, of course, it will be examined at P2 is often in the application, and you may have to be spotting that the accounting standard is actually relevant in a particular scenario. ISA 38 deals with intangible assets. It does specifically exclude, deferred tax balances and pension balances, and specifically excludes goodwill. Let's start with the definition, then we can talk about the examples. That's a tangible asset, isn't it? Table has a physical presence. So an intangible asset is just you can't see it, you can't touch it. But it's identifiable. So it's an identifiable, non-monetary asset without a physical presence. So the key issue about an intangible asset is that it is an identifiable, non-monetary asset without a physical substance, without a physical presence. Now, before we explore that definition, so it's an identifiable non-monetary asset without a physical substance. There are lots of examples. Could you give me an example? Yeah, we're excluding goodwill because goodwill is separately accounted for, and goodwill is an annual impairment review, and we've got the whole group account which deals with goodwill. This is dealing with other intangible assets. Patents, a very simple example would be patents. Licenses, software, brands, copyrights, intellectual rights, fishing rights. You can have a license to drill for oil. Now look, I'm a visitor to Malaysia. But I visit lots of countries and I read the papers sometimes. So what are we up to now? 3G, 4G, 5G? In the telecommunications industry. And your government will have licensed certain companies to use that. And the telecommunication companies, they pay a lot of money to buy the license to use and to trade. The government sets that out. So sometimes you're paying licenses for minerals, the right to drill for oil, the right to use the airwaves. You might have an invention that you register as a patent. You might invent a software or buy software, brands, etc., etc., etc. So there are lots of very important, valuable, intangible assets around. Now for me, there are two key aspects to the definition of an intangible asset. One is the fact that it's identifiable. Now, if we talk about an intangible asset, then it has to be identifiable, and that means it is either separable, it is capable of being sold, or it is backed by some kind of legal contract. So, goodwill is not separable. You cannot sell goodwill in isolation. which is why ISA 38 defines an intangible asset that excludes goodwill. So for it to be identifiable, you have to be able to sell the brand, sell the patent, sell the license, sell the software on its own, or it is backed by a legal contract. So a patent is registered. Yeah, you've got a legal evidence that it is yours and you can protect those rights. So it has to be identifiable. If you can't identify it by contract or selling it, it's not an intangible asset. Secondly, if it is to be regarded as an asset, you must have control. So if we think about the framework says that an asset is a resource that we control as a result of past transactions or events that will give us future economic benefits. Control. Yeah? And tied up with that is the idea of risk and reward. So an asset is something that we control and gives us future economic benefit. So I'm happy with what an intangible asset is. You cannot touch it, but you control it. You could sell it, or you've got some kind of legal contract, and it's a good thing. It's a valuable thing. Landing rights at an airport. Yeah, fishing rights, mineral rights, intellectual rights, copyright, patents, brands. These are all examples of intangible assets. Now, there are several ways that we can come across intangible assets. There are several ways that we can come across intangible assets. The simplest way is that we purchase. So the initial recognition will be at cost. The simplest way is that you buy the intangible asset. You buy the license. Credit cash, if you pay 10 million, debit intangible asset, 10 million. That is the simplest thing that you can do. You make a separate purchase. So the initial recognition will be at cost. That's very uncontroversial. That's very simple. You just buy it. Credit cash, debit asset. What's the other way that you come across an intangible asset? You develop it yourself. Yeah? You make it yourself. So the other way is development. Now, this is much more examinable, this is much more interesting, this is much more subjective. Car companies, pharmaceutical companies have big departments called R&D, research and development. They're looking for a new drug. They're looking for a new car, to develop a new car. So they will spend money on research and development. They will develop their own brand. They will develop their own products. Now, we've got some very specific rules about research and development. First of all, let's take research. Research is original investigation. Research is about gaining new knowledge for its own sake. Now, what do we do? You know this, please tell me you know this. What do we do with our expenditure on research? Do we capitalize it or do we expense it? Expense it, thank you very much. Let's get this done sooner rather than later. So research is original investigation. Research is original investigation, and therefore is a P&L expense. You must write off revenue expenditure on research. It doesn't give you any potential lasting benefit that is reliable. Now, development is a different kettle of fish. Development is the use of existing knowledge. Development is the use of existing knowledge to create new products, or processes. And what you do with your revenue expenditure on development is that you capitalize. So the revenue expenditure on development is that you capitalize as an intangible asset. You capitalize as an intangible asset if you meet the conditions. So if it's research expense, the revenue expenditure on research is written off. Market research expense, original investigations expense. But the development, where you use your existing knowledge to create a prototype, where you do testing of a new product, when you start spending money on that, you capitalize that expenditure as an intangible asset, providing that it meets the sort of safety conditions, for being regarded as an intangible asset. And one way of thinking about those conditions would be to remember a mnemonic called sector. If you're going to capitalize expenditure on development, you need to know that we're developing a drug or a car. There has to be a project. You can't just be doing it in a very abstract sense. So there's a very specific thing that we're doing it. There is a separate project. New drug, new car. The expenditure is identifiable. The expenditure is identifiable. You set up a cost center. You set up a cost center. So you know how much wages are being, you know the wages of the people who are working on it. You know the materials they are using, the rent. You are able to identify the costs. It has to be commercially viable. Has to be commercially viable. It has to be technically feasible. If it is not technically feasible, then it must be research. Because research is about solving a problem. Development is about taking existing knowledge and making a better solution, a better product. Commercially viable, technically feasible. It must overall be profitable. It must overall be profitable. There must be economic benefit. It must overall be profitable or be cost saving. You could, after all, develop a software package that you never actually sell, but you develop that software package, and that software package saves you costs. You would still be able to capitalize the revenue expenditure on developing an intangible asset, even if you never physically sold it. The economic benefit you could get from it could be cost saving. So, you've got a separate project, a new drug, a new car, you can identify the expenditure, people are going to buy it. It's commercially, there's a place in the market for it, it's technically feasible, so you've cracked all the chemical processes and the engineering issues. Overall, it will be profitable, it will be cost saving, so there will be an economic benefit from it, and you have the resources to complete. You have the resources to complete. You are then able to capitalise the revenue expenditure on development. You're then able to capitalise the revenue expenditure on development. We must not capitalise, we must not recognise our own trading costs, our advertising, our marketing, our internal goodwill as an asset. If we spend money on advertising, if we spend money on marketing, if we spend money on promotion, that money, that cost has to be expensed. A lot of money is spent on advertising. A lot of money is spent on creating a brand. Nike. Yeah? That little tick, Nike. I think they paid Tiger Woods a lot of money. Because every time you see a picture of Tiger Woods, he's got one of the baseball caps on, he's got a shirt on, he's got the shoes, and it's always got the tick, it's always got the Nike brand. So what Nike do is they pay Tiger Woods a lot of cash. Credit cash, debit P&L. It's advertising. It's marketing. So in the balance sheet of Nike, you don't see Nike as an asset. In the balance sheet of Coca-Cola, you don't see Coca-Cola as an asset. In the balance sheet of Google, you don't see Google as an asset. It's ironic, isn't it? Because the most valuable thing about Nike is not the factory, is not the cars, it's the brand. But it's a brand that it has created. And if you create your own brand, you are prohibited from recognizing that as an asset. You are prohibited from recognizing your own brand. You're prohibited from recognizing your own goodwill as an asset. Now, pause. If I buy Nike, in Nike's balance sheet there is no goodwill. In Nike's balance sheet there is no brand. But if I buy Nike, I'm the parent company, and then it's group accounts time. I would then have to do a fair value exercise on the assets and liabilities of the subsidiary, and if the subsidiary had a brand name, it would be zero in its accounts, but I, as a consolidation adjustment, would ask myself the question, does it have a reliable fair value? if it has a reliable fair value, I would then recognize